Cage Nation? It's Kevin Jackwoods here with the Cage Review. And I wanted to make part 2 of A Walk in My Shoes, which is a section that deals with my personal life and it gives you guys a chance to get to know who I am and why. And it deals with basically some of the biggest parts of my life, the things that have had the biggest impact on me and left a lasting impression. Easy for me to say. So, I'm doing this for 2 reasons. A, the aforementioned, letting people get to know me. But B, I'm trying to let people who might be going through something that I've already gone through a little bit of knowledge, ways to deal with things that they've had to go through, traumatic experiences, letting them know that they're not alone and that life does get better. And I think that's important, especially for anybody who's ever gone through the life that I've had. To reach out to other people and it's kind of paying it forward in a way, and it's very cathartic in another way. Having said that, I do want to say, and I've said this in the last post, this section in particular, I'm very careful how people tread with this. If you're here to listen to a story, maybe get to know somebody or take something away from it, that is great and I appreciate it. But if you're here to troll or just cause problems, let me say that you're not going to affect me. Trust me, you're not going to make me mad. Your opinion is not important enough for me to care. I'm just going to block you, and you're just wasting your time. This is for people who, really have issues that they need to deal with. And I know that some people just get off and exploiting other people's misery, but this won't be the place for it. Trust me, there's nothing you can say to me or about me I haven't heard 100,000 times. And for other people who don't have my strength of character, I'm not going to let you badger them. I won't. You'll just be blocked. So having said that, I left off when I was being bullied in school, and the bullying was pretty atrocious. I've been set on fire. I've had cologne thrown in my eyes. Just some horrendous stuff, been cut down to the skull. But what I left out of that story was my family life. And it was a very broken family from the beginning. My parents were still dealing with their demons themselves, my mom and my stepdad. And they weren't really there for me. And I say that gently because things are different now. We've kind of worked out, the issues between me and my mom. My stepdad is another story. But, so I'm not trying to, put salt in the wound with this. I'm just trying to state things as matter-of-factly as they were. And the fact was that I was kind of alone through my childhood. And going through some very ugly times. And I was a problematic child, especially the fact that I would come home and, I'd have this situation or that situation, or this kid did that to me, or I have to be taken to the hospital, or they need to, take me into the principal's office to find out what's going on in the school. But that was kind of the extent of their parenting. I was very introverted. I didn't have many friends, if any at times, and that was my life. Rich was a Vietnam vet, my stepdad. He, I respect the fact that he was a Vietnam vet, and I respect what he went through and what he did. But he didn't have any patience for kids. And it finally came to a point where he was just tired of raising kids. He didn't even raise his own kids. So, what the hell is he going to do with someone else's? And he just did not have any patience. And because of my, problems, it was very strained. There was a lot of friction in the house. And of course, at some point I start getting angry because I'm getting my ass kicked every day and no one's there to do anything about it. I remember when I had the kid that threw cologne in my eyes, they knew who did it, and they brought him and his mom over to the house where we were at, and there was a conversation, And, his mom's like, oh, well, kids will be kids. And then my mom and stepdad were just like, yeah, that's okay. And I'm like, what? I got second degree chemical burns inside my eye sockets and you're not going to do anything? Like, I never understood. They just didn't want to deal with anything. Anything was too much for them to deal with. And I suffered for it. So at 17 years old, Rich decides that he is just done raising kids. The friction is too much. He doesn't know how to handle a teenager. He feels like I should already be out there, in the job place, making something of myself. And what Rich didn't understand is his childhood and my childhood were entirely different. I was very sheltered. I didn't do anything. I stayed at home because I was scared to go outside because everybody was beating my ass. And I would stay in my room with a radio. And they didn't teach me anything, they didn't teach me how to budget, they didn't teach me the importance of money. They barely taught me the importance of hygiene. So I was completely unprepared for the world. And the next thing I know, I'm homeless. At 17 years old, learning how to survive. It was a terrible situation from the get-go. The things that I had to go through, I wouldn't wish on too many people. I started out, it's mid-January, it's very cold, it's like negative 20, just that real bitter cold like it is this winter. And I didn't know what to do. I was trying literally to survive. I didn't know where to get food. One time I punched through a wooden door to an Ace Hardware because they had a candy rack, and that's how I ate that day. And there was a mobile home park that we lived in, and at the front of this mobile home park were demonstration mobile homes that, they would take people and show them the mobile homes and see if they'd want to buy them. And they left these open all night. And so when it was really cold out, I would get into these mobile homes and sleep in the back bedrooms until one morning they're walking potential customers in, and there I am asleep on the floor. And at 17 years old, of course, they take me back to my parents, and that didn't last very long. And the next go around, being homeless, I found an abandoned shack behind this restaurant. It was where they threw a bunch of old pots and pans and boarded it up and forgot about it. And so I put what few belongings I had with me in that, and that's where I stayed. I had a blanket to keep me warm, and I'd wake up in the morning and my hands would be hurting and tingly, and my feet would be the same, and I'd literally walk through the day trying to thaw out. And it was a horrible experience, already that young, and coming off of everything else that I'd already gone through, it really started to change my personality. I used to be very fun-loving and upbeat, and life experiences, they were starting to beat me down. And I realized that I had to get somewhere warm. And one of my friends, Chris, he was going to stay with his brother for a little while in Orlando, Florida, and we kind of worked it out where I, showed up there and had a place to stay for a little while. So that's what happens. I get on a Greyhound bus, and I've got 4 bags with me, and I head myself down to Orlando. I get off the Greyhound bus, and instantly everything goes wrong. There was this guy who was, driving around the Greyhound bus, searching for the right person. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. And so he sees me. I got 4 bags. I'm looking lost. He's like, hey, you trying to get somewhere? You need a ride? And of course I did. So he says he can give me a ride to my friend's place. And I'm very trusting and very green about how the world works. So I'm like, okay, sounds good. And then he starts talking about how he's got a couple of guys in the construction field. He could probably get me a job. And okay, well, that sounds great. Again, very trusting, very naive. So we go to his place, we walk through the door, and we're going to get some business cards. And first thing I see is a couple of dogs laying in the hallway, a couple more in the living room, turns out to be like 8 dogs altogether in this house, and I didn't really think too much of it at the time. They were nice, they were calm, and it turns out that they were 8 trained, very well trained guard dogs. And let's face it, the only reason a guy is going to have 8 very well trained guard dogs in his house is because he's up to some shady shit. And it didn't take me long to realize that I was a prisoner in this guy's house. The dawning of that, it slowly started to sink in what was happening, and I'm not going to get into everything that happened in that house, but I was raped, and so a very horrible experience all the way around. And I'll never forget, there's this one moment where this guy gives a command in German to this dog after he's done doing his thing, and I'm just standing there, and next thing I know, the dog's in my face, teeth bared, drooling, snarling, and I was scared stiff. I literally could not move, and it was probably the best thing for me, because if I had, I probably would be dead today. But the fact is, I think at that moment, I was convinced that I wasn't going to make it out. There was no way that I was coming out of this house alive. And most people will never have to go through something like that or experience something like this. And if there is a God, I thank God for that, because it's pretty shitty. It leaves a mark on you. It changes you, and it sticks with you and transforms parts of your personality in ways that you don't see until years down the road. But thankfully, as you can see, I did make it out. And the guy even took me to my friend's house. And of course, I didn't tell my friend about any of this. I didn't go to the cops. I shoved it down, and it never happened. I didn't know how to process it. I think the trauma of the whole thing, my defense mechanism was to not deal with it, which was the worst thing to do, because it did come back and manifest itself in some pretty ugly ways later in life. And we'll get to that later along this storyline. But it's just one of those things where you go from being this unassuming, quiet kid that is basically good at heart, and then something like this happens, and everything changes in an instant. And it was like that a lot when I was homeless in Florida, Orlando especially, because there is a large group of homosexual males in the homeless population in Orlando that are predators. And I had a lot of come-ons from guys, and I had a lot of guys try things, and I've had a lot of guys even push. And when you're young and you've been sheltered, you don't know how to react to this stuff. I wasn't a fighter at this point, and I certainly would defend myself, but sometimes you're just stuck in situations that don't turn out like you want them to, and that sucks. Let me say this real quick. I told a story about 3 racist black guys who set me on fire, and I said I don't blame an entire race for 3 individuals who set me on fire. And the same thing is true here. I'm not talking badly about gay people at all. I am talking badly about individual gay men who made very sick fucking choices, but I don't blame an entire sexuality for what a few men did. And that's important to say, because some people will go through this, women who have been raped by men and then they're just man haters, or men who have been subject to that as well. Whatever the case may be, you can't blame an entire race, religion, creed, sexuality. It doesn't matter. These were people, individuals, And I just wanted to be clear on that I'm not blaming an entire group of people. But the fact is that I had to deal with a lot of gay men that were very pushy, and being a straight man, it caused a lot of conflicts in me. It's like, why is this happening to me? What did I do to invite this? Is there something about me or about my sexuality that I'm just not aware of? And while that may sound funny to some people who've never had this experience, they're confident in their sexuality. Believe me, when things like this happen, you don't understand it, and you put big question marks over everything. And it's very uncomfortable at times, and you have to do a lot of soul searching. And at this point in my life, having dealt with it, I realized that this is problems that these guys had. It's nothing about me. I was just there and an innocent victim. And it is what it is. And homeless life, it's a constant struggle when you're not an addict and you're not an all-around piece of shit, because people do try to take advantage of you. People do try to take whatever they can out of you. They will suck you dry and leave you a shell of who you were. And that has happened to me. I have been robbed. I've been raped. I have slept in the woods. I eaten out of garbage cans. Because when I was up north, there were no shelters. There were no food kitchens. There was none of that. And it was just survive however you could, however you had to. And, it does get bad. I mean, I've had people try to rob me for money I didn't have. I've had knives at my throat, and I've stared guns in the face. And everything that happens is just a little bit heavier weight on your shoulders. And it does change who you are. I don't care what anybody says. You go through this shit, you are a much, much different person on the other side. Good, bad, or indifferent. So, I was not the type of person to deal with this stuff. Like I said, I shoved it down for a long time. And it started to manifest itself in different ways. And I think the most immediate way was the anger I had about my life. And I would go into these fits of fucking rage that were big. I caused a lot of damage. And when I finally did learn how to fight and learn how to defend myself, and I was kind of pretty damn good. I lost more fights, I won more fights than I lost. I started to get a big head on my shoulders. I would rush into any fight just to prove that no one was going to ever victimize me again. But the anger I had, especially towards my parents, I would lash out in huge ways, and nobody really understood it. They didn't get it because they didn't deal with things the way that I did when they were going through shit, or they just didn't understand what I had gone through. I destroyed a lot of relationships, whether it be family, friend, or romantic. I just tore apart relationships. I separated myself from people. I was disgusted with humanity, and I didn't trust anybody. I got to a point where no one could tell me a line that was real. Everybody had an agenda. Everybody was full of shit. And that sucks to live that kind of life. It really does, because you're alone. You're in solitude your whole life because you can't trust anybody. Romantic relationships were really strained because now I have this weird I don't want to say I have a drive to prove that I'm straight, because I don't think that that's the accurate way to say it. But for some reason, my sexuality just like kind of exploded, and I slept around like crazy, and like I was dangerous with it. I would sleep with any chick that was ready. Um, and I don't know where that came from, and it was definitely a massive change. And relationships, like if I had actually gotten a girlfriend, it wouldn't last long, because all I wanted to do was have sex, and I made them feel like a piece of meat, and ruined a lot of relationships just over that alone. So, and that's what I'm saying. Like, this really started to manifest itself in very weird ways that I wouldn't have expected. Um, and I think the biggest thing that I can say as far as the road back from this really dark place, I mean, I was drinking really heavily. I was drinking every day. Thankfully, I didn't get into drugs that much. I tried them, but it just wasn't my thing. And that was a blessing within itself, because if I had, I'd probably be dead already. Um, but partying, drinking, I did kind of experiment with drugs, whoring around. I mean, literally everything I could do to destroy my life was happening. I was Charlie Sheening my life. That's what it was. And we all know how that turned out for him. So I'm very fortunate to be here today, healthy, clean, um, and in a somewhat stable frame of mind. And that all started because at some point much, much later in life, um, I was living in Florida, and I think I was in Sarasota at the time, or Bradenton. And, I'd kind of gone back and forth between having a place, working, and, being able to maintain, and screwing things up and being homeless. And I finally landed in this place called the ARC Center for the Salvation Army, and that stands for Adult Rehabilitation Center. It's basically for people who have huge drinking or drug problems. And I had neither. It was literally a place where I could get 3 hot meals and a warm bed. But I met this guy in there, and he just dealt with addiction, period. And he was, very well aware of, like sex addictions and things like that. And he was trying to deal with me on that part of it. And he talked me into going to this symposium. It was a 3-day study about how to deal with things that have happened to you in your life, and how to kind of expel the negative energy. And, when I say negative energy, I'm not religious. I'm not really even spiritual. Just a way of kind of figuratively exercising your demons and facing what has happened to you head on. And it starts a conversation where you have to talk about, the worst things that have happened to you, and dealing with all these emotions that you've never dealt with before. And it was probably the best thing I've ever done. Because one thing I've realized is, even in just finding someone to talk about it, to open up and face it, it becomes less significant every time you do that. And the more you talk about it, the more you face your demons and whatever's happened to you in your life, the more you're able to face it and talk about it without breaking down. And believe me, there was a time when I could not talk about what I'm talking about right now without either breaking down, crying, or getting incredibly angry. And honestly, neither one of those things serves a purpose. There's no point in being depressed about what's already happened. You can't do shit about it. It's done. It's in the past. It's going to leave a stain. But you can't live your life in the past. You can't let it control you. Otherwise, you won't have a future. And that's just as simple as it gets. And you can't stay angry about it. Anger turns into taking out what somebody did to you on someone else, and probably someone you care about or that you want in your life. And you're going to push them away because this person was a sick prick. And that is very destructive, very self-damaging. So if I have a piece of advice for anybody who's been through something like this, especially rape, sexual assault, anything like that, don't shove it down. Do not shove it down, because it comes back and it forms this core that just eats at you like a cancer. And you destroy everything around you because you don't know how to cope with life. Talk about it. Find somebody, find a group, go to a counselor. I don't care. You have to talk about it though. Because in talking about it, you're accepting the fact that, okay, this happened to me. You're facing the fact that this happened to you. You're dealing with the emotions, and it's not comfortable. I'm not going to sit here and lie and be like, oh yeah, it's a great experience. No, it sucks. It is one of the worst things you'll go through next to what you already went through. But it's necessary. You know, if you cut someone's leg, especially if you cut it really deep, it's going to hurt for a while. Long after the blood has stopped flowing, it's going to hurt. And the more it heals, the more it hurts, the itchier it gets, and it's just going to remind you it's there. And, you know, this is the same way. You know, you get that itch from whatever's happened to you, and it just keeps reminding you, yo, I'm still here. You haven't dealt with me yet. I'm not healed. And that will continue until you face it and heal it and do your best to, you know, deal with it. And, you know, these are things that are very important in the healing process. It took a long time for me to bounce back, you know, because people talk about being bullied. I've experienced that. People talk to me about being raped. I've experienced that. Being homeless. I've experienced that. And here I am, still, hopefully, reasonably well adjusted, in a beautiful home, trying to make something of myself. Now I'm dealing with health issues, but that's a whole other ball of wax. You know, and I have every reason in the world to be down on myself, to say, fuck life, I'm so tired of this. But what's that going to do? You have one life. You only get this one shot. You better make it count. So I don't want to be pissed off the rest of my life over what happened to me. I don't want to be hurt the rest of my life over what happened to me. I want to make something of myself. I want to be happy. I choose to rise above. And there are certainly people that have had it worse than me. I've heard some stories that make me cringe and, you know, make me really, like, my heart really goes out to these people. So there's always going to be a story worse than the next person's. But I guarantee that my story is worse than most people that will ever watch this. The story, I'm giving you guys the tip of the iceberg of what's happened to me. So, you know, I just want you guys to realize that there is a way back. Sometimes it's a long road, and sometimes you have to have people that really have your back. And if you don't have anybody, go to a church. That's how mine started. That's how my road back started. I went to a church and I found a Christian family, and they were very helpful and they were very good people. And I truly believe that they believed what they were, you know, doing. Not just in life, but in their religion. And it's not a religion that I follow, and that's just a personal choice, and I have reasons for that. But I respect it, and I respect their decisions, and I respect their choices in life. They're very good people. But the point being is that if you are completely alone, and believe me, there are people out there that are completely alone, then use resources, use churches, talk to people. It does make a world difference at the end of the day. And believe me, I was a person that was just angry at everything and no one could tell me anything. It was very hard to deal with for a while because of that. So, guys, it's so important for me to say that because there are too many lives that are destroyed because other people get involved in their lives and just use them however they want. And it sucks. It's completely unfair. But that's life. Sometimes life gives us a bowl of shit and we have to figure out how to make it a stew. I mean, it's just the way it is. So, I don't know exactly what I'll be heading into next. I'll probably be dealing with my years where I was living in Orlando and everything that I saw there. And during my DJ years, I actually got a job as a DJ in Orlando. And that then turned into a whole other ball of wax. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like this video, if you took something away from it, or if you just like hearing the stories, please don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and share. And if you're listening and you're somebody who has gone through something, I will always have an open door for them. You can message me here on YouTube if somebody ever needs to talk. My Facebook is linked here. My Twitter account is linked here. I'd prefer if you want to do something private, just private message me on Facebook. I have no problem talking to anybody at any time. So just know that, and I will always be willing and ready. So that is the post for now, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kevin Jackwitz. This is the Cage Review. Cage Nation out.